Dr. Hana bent down to examine the strange blue crystals growing from the rocky ground. These formations were unlike anything her people had seen before. The crystals hummed with a soft energy that made her sensitive Therian ears tingle. She carefully placed a small sample into her collection pouch, making sure not to disturb the delicate structure. Her team spread out across the valley floor, each member focused on their own discoveries. The planet Arcturus 7 was a treasure trove of new life forms and geological wonders. For the Therians, this was the expedition of a lifetime. They had traveled across 3 star systems to reach this remote world, driven by their endless curiosity about the universe. Hana's species had evolved on a peaceful world where the biggest threat was a seasonal storm or an occasional landslide. Violence was foreign to them. They had no concept of predator and prey because such relationships simply didn't exist in their corner of the galaxy. Their bodies were tall and slender, built for reaching high fruits and walking long distances. Across gentle plains, their large dark eyes were designed to spot the ripest foods and the most beautiful sunsets, not to watch for danger. The warning came too late. A low growl echoed through the valley, bouncing off the crystal formations and creating an eerie chorus of sound. Hana looked up from her work, confused by the noise. She had never heard anything like it before. The sound made something deep in her mind feel uncomfortable, though she couldn't understand why. The other team members stopped their work too, all looking around with the same puzzled expressions. Dr. Kwan, the expedition leader, stood up slowly from where he had been examining some unusual plant life. His face showed the same confusion they all felt. Then they saw it. The creature emerged from behind a cluster of tall crystals, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb the planet's pale sunlight. But it was the claws that gave the beast its name among the human surveyors who had first catalogued it. Each paw ended in razor-sharp talons that could slice through stone as easily as cutting through water. The razor claw's eyes locked onto Hana immediately. She was closest to its territory, closest to the crystal formation it had claimed as its own. The creature's gaze held an intelligence that chilled her to the bone. This wasn't just some mindless animal. It was thinking, calculating, deciding what to do with these strange intruders. Hana tried to move backward, but her legs wouldn't obey. Fear paralyzed her in a way she had never experienced. Her people had words for concern, worry, and anxiety, but they had no word for the pure terror that now filled her mind. The razor claw began moving toward her, each step deliberate and threatening. The other Therians scattered in panic, running in different directions without any plan or coordination. Their peaceful nature had never prepared them for a moment like this. They had no instincts for dealing with a predator because they had never needed them. Hana stood frozen as the massive creature approached. Its breath created small clouds in the cool air, and she could see the powerful muscles moving beneath its dark fur. The razor claw was close enough now that she could smell its wild scent, a mixture of earth and something else she couldn't identify. Just when the creature seemed ready to strike, a figure stepped out from the tree line. The human surveyor, June, had been mapping the area's mineral deposits when he heard the commotion. He moved with a confidence that seemed impossible given the situation, positioning himself die. The razor claw lowered its massive head and prepared to charge. Its powerful hind legs coiled like springs, ready to launch its 3-meter frame forward with deadly force. Hana could see the creature's muscles tense beneath its dark fur. She knew she had seconds before those razor-sharp claws would tear through her. But then June did something that made no sense to her Therian mind. Instead of running away or trying to hide, the human took a step forward, not sideways to escape, not backward to retreat, but directly toward the charging predator. His movement was calm and deliberate, like he was walking up to greet an old friend rather than facing down a killing machine. The razor claw launched itself forward, covering the distance between them in powerful bounds. Its claws dug deep grooves in the rocky ground with each step, sending small stones flying. The sound of its approach was like thunder rolling across the valley. June planted his feet firmly and raised his head. His eyes found the creature's gaze and locked onto it with an intensity that made Hana's breath catch in her throat. She had never seen a look like that before. It wasn't anger or fear or desperation. It was something much older and deeper than any emotion she could understand. The human's eyes held the razor claw's attention completely. There was no blinking, no looking away, no sign of weakness or submission. June's stare was steady and unwavering, carrying a message that needed no words or sounds to communicate. Something extraordinary happened in that moment of eye contact. The charging beast began to slow down. Its powerful stride became uncertain, less confident. The razor claw's head tilted slightly to one side, as if it was trying to figure out a puzzle that didn't make sense. The creature had lived on this planet for years, ruling its territory without challenge. It knew the smell of fear, the look of prey animals when they realized their fate. But this wasn't fear it was seeing in the human's eyes. The razor claw came to a complete stop just 3 meters away from June. Its breathing was heavy from the charge, creating small clouds of vapor in the cool air. The creature's own eyes, which had moments before held predatory confidence, now showed something Hannah had never expected to see in such a dangerous animal. Confusion. The beast took a step backward, then another. Its massive head swayed from side to side as it tried to understand what it was seeing. Every instinct the razor claw possessed told it that the smaller creature in front of it should be running, screaming, begging for mercy. That's what prey did when faced with certain death. But June wasn't acting like prey. He was acting like something else entirely, something the razor claw recognized on a level deeper than conscious thought. The human's posture, his unwavering gaze, the way he held his ground without flinching, all spoke a language that predators understood instinctively. This was the stance of another hunter. The razor claw's ears flattened against its head. For the first time in its adult life, it felt uncertain about a confrontation. The creature that had ruled this valley through strength and intimidation was experiencing something completely foreign to its nature. Doubt. Hannah watched the entire exchange in complete silence. Her theory and mind struggled to process what she was witnessing. She had never seen anything like this before, because her people had never needed to. The peaceful worlds of her species had no predators, no hunting, no life or death confrontations. Between thinking beings and wild animals, the human never moved from his position. He never raised his voice or made threatening gestures. He simply stood there, meeting the creature's gaze with an intensity that spoke of something ancient and primal, something that existed long before civilizations built cities or species. Learn to travel between stars. The razor claw took several more steps backward, its eyes never leaving June's face. Then, with a sound that might have been confusion or frustration, the massive creature turned and disappeared back into the crystal formations from which it had emerged. Hannah's legs shook as they walked away from the crystal formations. She kept looking back over her shoulder, expecting to see the razor claw following them, but the creature had vanished completely. Her mind raced with questions that she didn't know how to ask. Everything she had just witnessed went against everything. She understood about how the universe worked. What just happened back there? She finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. June glanced at her as they made their way through the rocky terrain. His expression had returned to the calm, friendly demeanor she had known during their brief interactions at the research station. It was hard to believe this was the same person, who had just faced down a massive predator without showing any fear. "You've never seen anything like that before, have you?" June asked gently. Hannah shook her head. "My people don't have creatures like that on our world. We don't have anything that hunts other living things. I don't even understand what hunting means, not really." They walked in silence for a few minutes, picking their way carefully between the scattered rocks and strange plant life. Hannah's mind kept replaying the scene with the razor claw, the way the creature had stopped mid-charge, the confusion in its eyes, the way it had backed away from a being much smaller than itself. "How did you make it leave?" she asked. "You didn't have any weapons. You didn't make any loud noises or threatening gestures. You just looked at it." June stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was thoughtful, like he was trying to figure out how to explain something very complicated in simple terms. "My species evolved differently than yours," he said slowly. "Humans came from a world where survival meant being able to hunt other animals for food. We spent millions of years learning how to track, chase, and catch creatures that were often bigger and stronger than we were. Hana's large eyes widened. The concept was so foreign to her that she struggled to even imagine it. You mean humans killed other living things to eat them? We had to, June explained. Our world didn't have enough plants that humans could eat to keep us alive. So we learned to hunt. We developed special skills for it. Our eyes, for example. He pointed to his own face. See how my eyes face forward instead of to the sides? That's because forward-facing eyes are better for judging distances when you're chasing something. Most prey animals have eyes on the sides of their heads so they can watch for danger from all directions. Hana touched her own face unconsciously. Her eyes were large and set wide apart, designed for taking in as much visual information as possible about her peaceful surroundings. The idea that eye placement could be related to hunting or being hunted had never occurred to her. We also learned to work together, June continued. Human hunting parties could track an animal for days, taking turns to chase it until it became too tired to run anymore. We called it persistence hunting. We weren't the fastest or strongest, but we never gave up. But that's impossible, Hana said, her voice filled with confusion. If humans spent all that time hunting and killing, how did you become intelligent? How did you build cities and spaceships? How did you learn to be peaceful? June smiled at her bewilderment. That's what makes humans unusual, I suppose. We developed big brains because hunting required so much thinking and planning. We had to understand animal behavior, track movement patterns, coordinate with our hunting partners, and make tools. All of that thinking made us smarter. But the violence, Hana protested, all that killing and hunting, how did you move beyond that? We didn't move beyond it, June said quietly. We learned to control it. The hunting instincts are still there, buried deep in every human mind. We just choose not to use them most of the time. Hana stared at him in amazement. You mean when you looked at that creature, it saw those hunting instincts in you? Predators recognize other predators, June explained. That razor claw has probably never met another creature that could challenge it. When it looked into my eyes, it saw something it understood on an instinctual level. It saw another hunter. The base camp came into view just as the twin suns of Arcturus 7 began to set, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. Hana felt relieved to see the familiar dome-shaped shelters and equipment stations that had been their home for the past 3 weeks. After the terrifying encounter with the razor claw, she wanted nothing more than to be surrounded by her fellow researchers and the safety of their temporary settlement. But something was wrong. The camp was too quiet. Usually at this time of day, her colleagues would be preparing the evening meal, discussing their daily discoveries, or uploading their research data to the orbital station. Instead, an eerie silence hung over the entire area, like a thick blanket. They got closer. Hana could hear strange sounds coming from the camp, low growling noises mixed with what sounded like scratching and scraping. Her sensitive Therian ears picked up something else too, the frightened whimpering of her people. June held up his hand, signaling for her to stop. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. The friendly, talkative human who had been explaining hunting techniques just moments before was gone. In his place stood someone Hana barely recognized, alert, focused, and completely still as he studied the scene ahead. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. They crept forward until they could see the camp clearly. What Hana saw made her blood freeze in her veins. The research station was surrounded by at least a dozen creatures she had never seen before. They were smaller than the razor claw, about the size of a large dog, but they moved with a pack mentality. That made them far more dangerous. The blood fangs were aptly named. Their mouths were filled with needle-sharp teeth that gleamed red in the fading sunlight. Their bodies were lean and built for speed, covered in dark grey fur that helped them blend into the shadows between the rocks. But it was their eyes that truly terrified Hana. They glowed with an intelligence that spoke of coordinated hunting strategies. The creatures had cornered her research team inside the main shelter. Through the transparent walls, she could see Dr. Kwan and the other Therians huddled together in the center of the room. Their faces showed pure terror as the bloodfangs prowled around the outside of the structure, testing for weak points and entry opportunities. Some of the creatures were already clawing at the shelter's walls, their sharp talons leaving deep scratches in the reinforced material. Others had knocked over equipment and scattered research samples across the ground. One particularly large bloodfang stood near the shelter's main entrance, its head tilted, as if it was trying to figure out how to break through the sealed door. Hannah's first instinct was to run toward the shelter, to try to help her colleagues. Somehow, but June's firm hand on her arm stopped her before she could take a single step. She looked at him and felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. June's expression was unlike anything she had ever seen on a sentient being's face. His eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the scene below. He counted the creatures, noted their positions, observed their behavior patterns, and identified potential weapons among the scattered equipment. His breathing was slow and controlled, and his body was perfectly still except for those constantly moving eyes. This wasn't the look of someone who was afraid or panicked. This was the expression of a predator studying its prey. 12 of them, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. 2 by the main entrance, 3 on the left side, 4 testing the back wall, 3 more scattered around the perimeter. The clinical way he assessed the situation frightened Hannah more than the sight of the bloodfangs themselves. June wasn't seeing a desperate rescue situation or a tragic disaster. He was seeing a tactical problem that needed to be solved, and the cold efficiency in his voice suggested he already knew exactly how to solve it. "What are you going to do?" Hannah whispered. June didn't answer immediately. He was still studying the pack, watching how they moved and communicated with each other. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a certainty that made her shiver. "I'm going to hunt the hunters." June moved like a shadow in the fading light. Hannah watched from their hiding spot as he circled around the camp's perimeter, staying low and using the rocky terrain to remain hidden. The bloodfangs were so focused on trying to break into the shelter that they didn't notice the human approaching from behind. He had picked up a piece of metal debris from the scattered equipment, part of a broken geological scanner that had a sharp, jagged edge. In his hands, the innocent research tool became something else entirely. Hannah had never seen anyone hold an object with such purposeful intent. The first bloodfang never knew what hit it. June appeared behind the creature like a ghost, moving with complete silence across the rocky ground. The attack was over in seconds, quick and clean. The bloodfang dropped without making a sound that might alert the rest of the pack. 11 left. June dragged the fallen creature behind a cluster of rocks, then melted back into the shadows. Hannah realized she was holding her breath as she watched him work. This wasn't the same person who had patiently explained human evolution to her just an hour ago. This was someone else entirely, someone who moved with deadly purpose and calculated precision. The second bloodfang was isolated on the far side of the camp, sniffing around the equipment storage area. June approached it from an angle where the creature's body would block the view of the others. Again, the attack was swift and silent. The bloodfang fell without alerting its packmates. 10 left. What disturbed Hannah most wasn't the violence itself. She was beginning to understand that sometimes violence was necessary for survival. What frightened her was how methodical June had become. He wasn't acting in panic or desperation. Every movement was planned, every action served a specific purpose. He was solving the problem of the bloodfang pack the same way she might solve. A complex mathematical equation, step by step with perfect logic. The third kill was different. This bloodfang was closer to the main group, and June couldn't approach it without being seen. So he changed his strategy. Instead of sneaking up behind it, he threw a small rock in the opposite direction. The sound made the creature turn its head to investigate, giving June the opening he needed to strike from the side. 9 left. By now, some of the bloodfangs were starting to sense that something was wrong. They lifted their heads from their assault on the shelter, sniffing the air and looking around nervously. But they couldn't see June, who had already moved to a new position among the rocks. The pack began to spread out, no longer focused entirely on the shelter. This was exactly what June had been waiting for. Divided, they were vulnerable. Together, they were dangerous. He picked off 2 more bloodfangs in quick succession, moving between the rocks like water flowing downhill. Each attack was perfectly timed, each movement calculated to avoid detection by the remaining creatures. 7 left. Through the transparent walls of the shelter, Hannah could see her colleagues watching in stunned silence. Dr. Kwan's face was pressed. Against the wall, his eyes wide with disbelief. The other Therians looked equally shocked. They had never witnessed anything like this before. The systematic elimination of a threat by a single individual using nothing but intelligence, planning, and deadly efficiency. The remaining Bloodfangs finally realized they were being hunted. They began to group together, forming a tight circle with their backs to each other. Their pack instincts told them to work together against this new threat, but they couldn't see their enemy clearly enough to fight back effectively. June adapted his strategy again. Instead of trying to pick them off individually, he began to herd them away from the shelter. Using thrown rocks and careful positioning, he forced the pack to move in the direction he wanted. The Bloodfangs found themselves being driven toward a narrow gap between two large rock formations, exactly where June wanted them. In that confined space, their pack coordination became a disadvantage. They couldn't spread out or use their superior numbers effectively. June had turned their greatest strength into a weakness. Hannah watched in fascination and horror as the gentle human researcher became something her peaceful species had no words to describe. A thinking predator, a creature of intelligence and violence combined in perfect, terrifying harmony. The silence that followed was deafening. The camp that had been filled with the growls and scratching of the Bloodfang pack was now completely quiet, except for the gentle evening breeze moving through the rock formations. The immediate threat was over, but the real shock was just beginning for the Therian research team. Dr. Kwan was the first to emerge from the shelter. His long, slender frame shook as he stepped outside, his large eyes darting nervously around the camp, as if expecting more creatures to appear at any moment. The other Therians followed slowly, staying close together like frightened children. They all stared at June, who was calmly examining the improvised weapon he had used. The piece of metal that had once been part of their geological equipment was now stained and damaged. He held it up to the fading light, checking its condition with the same careful attention a scientist might use to examine a research sample. "Is it over?" Dr. Kwan asked in a whisper, his voice barely audible. June looked up from his inspection of the metal fragment. His expression had returned to the friendly, approachable demeanor the Therians were familiar with, but somehow that made the situation even more unsettling. It was hard to believe that this calm, gentle-looking human had just systematically eliminated an entire pack of dangerous predators. "Yes, it's over," June said simply. "The immediate area is secure. You should be safe now." Dr. Kwan's reaction was not what Hannah expected. Instead of gratitude or relief, the expedition leader took several steps backward, putting more distance between himself and the human. His face showed a mixture of fear and disgust that made Hannah's heart sink. "Safe?" Dr. Kwan repeated, his voice rising in pitch. "Safe? We just watched you kill 12 living creatures without showing any emotion at all. You moved through them like... He struggled to find words for something his peaceful species had no reference for. The Therian language had no terms for systematic hunting, tactical elimination, or predatory behavior, because such concepts had never existed in their world. "Like a machine designed for death," Dr. Kwan finally finished. The other Therians murmured their agreement, their large eyes filled with fear as they looked at June. Dr. Yuki, the team's botanist, was actually trembling. Dr. Taro, who had always been friendly with the human surveyors, now couldn't seem to look directly at June. "I protected you," June said quietly, confusion evident in his voice. "Those creatures would have broken into your shelter eventually. They would have killed all of you. But the way you did it," Dr. Kwan replied, shaking his head. "The planning, the calculation, the complete lack of hesitation. You didn't just defend us. You hunted them. You enjoyed it." June started to protest, but Dr. Kwan held up his hand to stop him. "I saw your face during the fight," the expedition leader continued. "There was something in your expression that terrified me more than those creatures ever could. You weren't acting out of desperation or fear. You were doing what comes naturally to you." Hannah found herself caught between two conflicting emotions. Part of her agreed with Dr. Kwan's assessment, What she had witnessed was indeed terrifying. The methodical way June had eliminated the bloodfangs, the cold efficiency of his movements, the complete transformation from gentle researcher to deadly hunter, it all challenged everything she thought she knew about intelligent species. But another part of her couldn't forget that without June's intervention, she and her colleagues would likely be dead. The bloodfangs hadn't approached their shelter with peaceful intentions. They had been testing for weaknesses, looking for ways to get inside to the terrified Therians cowering within. She watched as June found a piece of cloth among the scattered equipment and began methodically cleaning the metal fragment. His movements were careful and thorough, removing every trace of what had happened. Even in this simple task, she could see the same attention to detail that had made him so effective against the pack. Perhaps, Dr. Kwan said slowly, we need to reconsider our relationship with humanity. Any species capable of such efficiency and violence might be too dangerous for peaceful contact. The camp settled into an uneasy quiet as the night deepened. The twin moons of Arcturus 7 cast pale silver light across the rocky landscape, creating long shadows that seemed to move and shift with every passing cloud. Most of the Therian researchers had retreated to their individual shelters, but sleep didn't come easily after what they had witnessed. Hannah lay in her sleeping area, staring up at the curved ceiling of her shelter. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the evening's events. June moving through the shadows, the systematic way he had eliminated the Bloodfang pack, the complete transformation from friendly researcher to something far more dangerous. She couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Dr. Kwan. The expedition leader's fear was understandable, but something about his reaction bothered her. Yes, what June had done was frightening, but he had saved their lives. Didn't that count for something? Unable to rest, Hannah quietly left her shelter and stepped into the cool night air. The camp's emergency lighting cast a soft glow over the scattered equipment that had been knocked around during the attack. Everything looked peaceful now, almost normal, as if the violence of a few hours ago had been nothing more than a bad dream. She found June sitting on a flat rock at the edge of the camp, looking out at the alien landscape. He had cleaned and put away the improvised weapon, and once again looked like the mild-mannered surveyor she had known for the past 3 weeks. But now she couldn't unsee what lay beneath that gentle exterior. "Can't sleep either?" she said softly as she approached. June turned to look at her, and she was surprised to see genuine sadness in his eyes. "Your people are afraid of me now," he said. "I can see it in how they look at me, how they avoid getting too close. Dr. Kwan thinks humanity is too dangerous for galactic contact." Hannah sat down on a nearby rock, keeping some distance between them but close enough for conversation. The question that had been burning in her mind all evening finally found its way to her lips. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked quietly. When you were hunting them?" June was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his honesty caught her off guard. "Part of me did," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something deep inside every human, something very old that responds to the hunt. The planning, the stalking, the moment when you know you've outthought your opponent. Yes, part of me enjoyed it, and that scares me more than it scares you." His answer sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the night air. She had asked the question expecting him to deny it, to reassure her that he had only acted out of necessity. Instead, he had confirmed her worst fears about human nature. "But that's not the whole story," June continued, looking directly at her. "Humans learned something very important during our evolution. We learned that the same instincts that make us dangerous also make us protectors." "I don't understand," Hannah said, though she wasn't sure she wanted to. "Think about what happened today," June explained. "Yes, I used predatory instincts to eliminate the Bloodfang pack. But why did I do it? I could have escaped easily. I could have left your team to their fate and saved myself. The hunting instincts that your Dr. Kwan finds so terrifying are the same instincts that made me stay and fight for people I barely know." Hannah considered his words carefully. It was true that June could have simply fled when they discovered the camp under attack. He had no obligation to risk his life for the Therian research team. Early humans lived in small groups, June continued. The same skills we used to hunt prey, we also used to protect our families and communities. The ability to think tactically, to plan ahead, to remain calm under pressure. These weren't just hunting skills. They were survival skills that helped us protect the people we cared about. But the violence, Hannah protested, the way you moved, the efficiency of it all. It was like watching a machine designed for killing. That's exactly what humans are, in a way, June said, with uncomfortable honesty. Millions of years of evolution shaped us into very effective predators. But evolution also gave us something else, the ability to choose how we use those skills. He gestured toward the camp where her colleagues slept fitfully in their shelters. I could have used my abilities to hunt your people instead of protecting them. Every human has that choice every day. We can use our predatory nature to harm others, or we can channel it into protection and defense. Hannah felt something shift in her understanding. The duality June described was unlike anything in Therian experience, but it was beginning to make sense. So when you looked at the razor claw today, she said slowly, it saw a predator, but when you looked at us tonight, you saw something worth protecting. Exactly, June said. The same instincts, but pointed in different directions. That's what makes humans both dangerous and valuable as allies. We understand violence intimately, which means we're very good at stopping it when it threatens the innocent. The rescue ship appeared 3 days later as a silver dot against the orange morning sky of Arcturus 7. Hannah watched it grow larger as it descended toward their camp, its sleek, Therian design a welcome sight after the dangerous events of the past few days. But as the ship settled onto the rocky ground with a soft hum of anti-grav engines, she felt a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. The ship carried more than just rescue. It brought the Therian Council's representatives who would decide humanity's future in galactic affairs. Council Elder Mira emerged first, her tall frame draped in the formal robes that marked her high position in Therian society. Behind her came Elder Shin and Elder Kenji, both respected voices in interspecies relations. Their expressions were serious as they surveyed the camp, taking in the scattered equipment and signs of the recent conflict. Dr. Kwan hurried forward to greet them, his relief at seeing fellow Therians clearly visible. Within minutes he was explaining what had happened, his voice growing more agitated as he described June's systematic elimination of the Bloodfang pack. The human showed no hesitation, no remorse, Dr. Kwan told the elders. He moved through those creatures like death itself, calculating every move, planning every strike. It was the most terrifying display of violence I have ever witnessed. Elder. Mira's large eyes found June, who stood quietly at the edge of the group. The human had remained respectful but distant since the rescue ship's arrival, clearly understanding that his actions were being judged by people who had no context for what he had done. Is this true? Elder Mira asked June directly. Did you kill 12 living creatures in the manner Dr. Kwan describes? Yes, June replied simply. They were threatening the research team. I eliminated the threat. The directness of his answer seemed to disturb the elders even more than Dr. Kwan's dramatic retelling. Elder Shin whispered something to Elder Kenji, their conversation too quiet for others to hear, but their concerned expressions spoke volumes. We have been in communication with other Therian expeditions, Elder Mira announced to the gathered group. Similar incidents have been reported from 3 other worlds where humans and Therians have worked together. In each case, humans responded to threats with what can only be described as systematic violence. Dr. Yuki, who had barely spoken since the attack, finally found her voice. They're too dangerous. Any species that can switch from peaceful cooperation to methodical killing so easily cannot be trusted as galactic partners. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Therian researchers. The fear that had been building since the attack was now crystallizing into a formal rejection of human alliance. But Hannah couldn't stay silent any longer. You're all missing the most important point, she said, stepping forward despite the trembling in her voice. June didn't have to help us. He could have escaped when he saw the camp was under attack. He could have saved himself and left us to die. Elder Mira turned her attention to Hannah. What are you suggesting, young researcher? I'm suggesting that we're looking at this completely wrong, Hannah replied. her confidence growing as she spoke. Yes, humans are capable of incredible violence. Yes, they can be frighteningly efficient killers. But they're also the only species we've encountered that chose to use those abilities to protect others instead of to dominate them. Dr. Kwan shook his head vigorously. That makes them even more unpredictable. How can we trust beings who carry such capacity for violence within them? Because they've already proven they can be trusted, Hana argued. Think about it. Humans evolved as apex predators. They could have conquered every peaceful species they've encountered. Instead, they chose to build alliances, to protect weaker civilizations, to share their technology rather than use it for conquest. She gestured toward June, who was listening intently to the debate about his species' future. June represents something unique in the galaxy. He's a predator who chose to become a protector. When he looked at that razor claw, it saw another hunter. But when he looked at us, he saw people worth saving. Elder Shin spoke for the first time. But the violence, the ease with which he killed, is exactly why we need humans as allies, Hana interrupted. The galaxy isn't a peaceful place. We've learned that the hard way on this expedition. There are predators out there, creatures and civilizations that see peaceful species like us as easy prey. We need someone who understands violence well enough to stop it. The camp fell silent as the elders considered her words. Hana could see the internal struggle on their faces, the fear of human violence warring with the logical need for protection in a dangerous universe. What you're describing, Elder Mira said slowly, is an alliance built on our weakness and their strength. That doesn't sound like an equal partnership. It's not about weakness or strength, Hana replied. It's about complementary abilities. We bring scientific curiosity, peaceful exploration, and diplomatic skills. They bring the ability to protect and defend what we build together. That's not inequality, that's balance. The debate continued for hours, but in the end Hana's words carried weight with the Therian Council. The elders agreed to continue diplomatic relations with humanity, though with new protocols and careful monitoring. It was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but it kept the door open for future cooperation. 2 days later, a human transport ship arrived to collect June and the other human personnel who had been working on various projects across Arcturus 7. The sleek vessel was different from Therian designs, more angular, built with efficiency and durability in mind, rather than the flowing aesthetic lines that Therians preferred. Hana stood on the observation deck of the Therian ship, watching through the transparent aluminum windows as the final preparations were made for departure. Below in the docking bay, she could see Jun carrying his research equipment toward the human vessel. His movements were the same calm, measured steps she had observed during their weeks of working together, but now she understood what lay beneath that gentle exterior. Dr. Kwan joined her at the viewing window, his expression still troubled despite the council's decision. "I still think we're making a mistake," he said quietly, "inviting such dangerous beings into our galactic community." "They were already part of it," Hana replied, without taking her eyes off June. "We just didn't understand what that meant until now." She watched as June paused before boarding his ship and looked up toward the observation windows. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. For a moment, she saw both versions of him simultaneously: the friendly researcher, who had patiently explained human evolution, and the deadly hunter, who had moved through the Bloodfang pack like a force of nature. The duality no longer frightened her as much as it had initially. Instead, she was beginning to appreciate the careful balance it represented. June carried within him the capacity for incredible violence, but he had chosen to use his knowledge and skills to explore alien worlds and protect peaceful researchers. That choice, repeated daily by millions of humans across the galaxy, was perhaps the most remarkable thing about his species. "I've been thinking about what you said during the council meeting," Dr. Kwan continued, "about humans being guardians who understand violence. But doesn't that make them judge and executioner? Who decides when violence is necessary?" It was a fair question, one that had kept Hana awake during the past 2 nights. "I think that's exactly why they're trustworthy," she said slowly, "because they struggle with that question themselves." June didn't enjoy what he had to do to save us. He was disturbed by his own capacity for violence. Someone who takes that responsibility lightly would be truly dangerous. The human ship's engines began to warm up, creating a low thrumming sound that vibrated through the hull of the Therian vessel. June had disappeared inside, but Hana continued to watch the sleek transport as it prepared for departure. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said to Dr. Kwan. "Before this expedition, I thought the most dangerous thing in the universe would be some mindless beast or aggressive alien civilization. I never imagined that the most frightening and reassuring thing I'd encounter would be the same person." The human ship lifted off with smooth precision, its anti-grav systems creating barely a whisper of sound. As it rose through Arcturus 7's atmosphere and disappeared into the star-filled void, Hana reflected on everything she had learned. The galaxy was full of genuine predators, creatures like the Razorclaw and Bloodfangs that killed without thought or choice. There were aggressive civilizations that expanded through conquest and domination. In a universe containing such threats, perhaps peaceful species needed allies who understood the language of violence, but chose not to speak it unless absolutely necessary. Humans weren't just warriors or killers, they were thinking predators, who had consciously decided to become protectors. They carried within themselves the tools of destruction, but used them to build and defend, rather than to conquer and consume. As the human ship became just another point of light among the stars, Hana realized her perspective had fundamentally changed. She no longer saw June as a gentle researcher, who occasionally became dangerous. Instead, she recognized him as a guardian who chose gentleness as his default state, while keeping his more lethal capabilities in reserve for when they were truly needed. In a universe where genuine monsters existed, perhaps the galaxy needed guardians who were monsters themselves, but monsters who had chosen to be something better. Directly between Hana and the approaching beast,